One of the other interesting issues in U.S.-Saudi relations in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, is that somehow this relationship, which in pre-9/11 days had been sort of the private affair of, the ruling elite in Saudi Arabia and a certain number of government and industry officials in the U.S., this now becomes a public issue in both countries. And at the same time, the publics in both countries decide they really don't like being associated this way with one another. So something that had been sort of private business now becomes democratized almost as an issue in both countries.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. That the success of the relationship really depended, I don't know, in large part, for a very important part of its success, on us not looking too closely at what kind of a society Saudi Arabia was. The Saudis knew us a lot better because tens of thousands of students had come here to be educated. I think altogether more than 200,000 Saudi students have been educated inside the United States. If you look at the Saudi cabinet today, most of them will have higher degrees from American universities. There were something like 100,000 Saudis who had apartments or homes inside the United States. So the Saudis knew us and know us, but we didn't know Saudi Arabia, and we really hadn't cared up to them because it hadn't been a problem for us.
Is the breach that was building perhaps before 9/11, but 9/11 came to symbolize it, is that breach irreparable? Is there something that could reestablish a balance in the relationship, or have things changed to the point where it's not particularly in the interest of either side that it be the way it was before?
I think the Saudis have decided that they can't afford to have the kind of close relationship they had with us before. The Prince Bandar, the former Saudi ambassador in Washington, once said to me, "Our relationship is like a Catholic marriage. We may have one or the other dalliances during the lifetime of this relationship, but basically we're married forever." And I asked the Saudi foreign minister, Prince Saud al-Faisal, is it true? Is that the way you look upon us? Is this a Catholic relationship you have with the United States? Are we in a Catholic marriage? He thought for a minute and he said, "Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country, and we have the right to 4 wives, not 1. And we are in the process of finding other wives in our relationship." And so they have quite deliberately sought out other countries with whom to associate, to sort of offset their relationship with the United States.
In particular China, I believe.
In particular China. And so I don't think they want the same kind of relation. On the other hand, they do want to try and repair what happened with the United States. And we have now restored a program allowing Saudi students to come into the United States. And while after 9/11 it went down to only a couple thousand Saudi students, we're now back up to about 25,000 Saudi students studying inside the United States on scholarships made available by King Abdullah. So they're trying to repair sort of the human relationship. But I think we've seen the end of the days of oil for security. It's not so simple any longer. And for one thing, the Saudis can no longer control the oil price the way they used to. American presidents would often go to the Saudis and say, "You got to do something about the oil price. I'm getting killed. Everybody's complaining about rising price of gasoline." And there was a time when the Saudis could actually, they'd increase the production or cut production or whatever it took to help the United States president solve his energy problems. That's no longer the case. In the past few months, we've reached a critical change in the balance. The Saudis used to provide more than 1 million barrels a day of oil to the United States and less than 1 million barrels a day to China. the Saudis are now providing us with less than 1 million barrels of oil, and they're providing China more than 1 million barrels of oil. In other words, they now consider the China market more important than the U.S. market to them.
So that's a deliberate step.
Yeah, and it's a very sort of symbolic point of crossroads, or whatever you want to call it, where suddenly China is more important to them for their oil market than the United States. And I think it reflects the change in where they're looking to develop their trade partners and sell their oil, and their deliberate attempt to develop other allies than the United States to help protect them if they get into Pakistan's becoming very important to them. Turkey's becoming very important to them. They're buying more arms from the British now than they do from us. So they're looking to spread their bets and their relationships. They're looking for arms from Russia. I mean, it's a whole new ballgame and a whole new world from the Saudi point of view.
I'd like to thank my guest, David Ottaway, former foreign correspondent for the Washington Post, now a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, author of the book The King's Messenger, Prince Bandar bin Sultan and America's Tangled Relationship with Saudi Arabia. On behalf of the National September 11th Memorial Museum, I'm Clifford Shannon.